There are things in this world that most people are afraid to face. Little dark corners they're too scared to look in. Thoughts they won't allow themselves to think. Lines they won't allow themselves to cross. They're frightened little children, hiding beneath the covers of their empty lives, afraid to look under the bed, afraid to face the monsters they know must dwell there. But that's where the strength is. That's where the power lies. Beyond the fear, that's the secret to greatness. Hunt down the thing you fear most and conquer it. Embrace it. Commune with it. Master it. Podcast it.
What's happening, Hellspawn? Welcome back to another episode of Spawnography. I'm one of your hosts, George Marston, pronouns they, them, or she, her. With me, as always, is...
Pierce Latin, pronouns they, them. Oh, I got too into that. I almost did the little spell at the end, you know?
I know that I almost made some demon voice there, but I was like, I don't know. I also almost went Santa Monica at the top, like fucking Anthony Kiedis, but I decided to let that... Fuck that guy. I hate that guy. I think the Red Hot Chili Peppers could be my least favorite band. They're certainly up there. There's that Nick Cave quote where he was like, I'm forever walking past cars, hearing the worst music and wondering what is this? And it's always the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which he recently walked back and he was like, oh, I just used them as an example of whatever. Fuck Nick Cave too. He's kind of a piece of shit. I'm not even going to qualify that. You can leave that in.
That's fine. Was there a time when you were confused about who Warren Ellis was?
There was so I will say, I really love the movie, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. Incredible film. It is so beautifully, hauntingly shot and visually incredible. And the performances are excellent. Brad Pitt's in it. Fuck him too. And Casey Affleck. Fuck that guy
everybody's
too.
just catching
It's just
strays
populated
today.
by fucking scumbags, man. But it's a good movie. Sometimes bad people make good art, and I don't blame the director. The point is, the soundtrack is transcendent. The score is transcendent, and that's Nick Cave and Warren Ellis. And the first time I saw that movie, shortly after it came out, I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
Because also, fuck
Same.
Warren Ellis. I mean,
well,
honestly,
wait, which one?
Not the composer.
Yeah, the comics one.
The comics one, yeah. The one we are talking about generally, if we say Warren Ellis. Yeah, no. I mean, we're just going down the laundry list of like, fuck you, we're cool. And I didn't mean to do that starting off. But hey, that's the energy I'm bringing into 2025, baby.
That's what happens when we record close together, I think, is that instead of giving updates on each other's lives, it's instead of a list of people who should go fuck themselves.
That's right. That's right. I also had most of a cherry Coke already, so
you're wired. Yeah, I'm having a lemon ginger tea with some honey.
That's been a staple for you lately, I've noticed. Quite nice.
It's been helping my voice, honestly.
Good for your voice, yeah.
So, we have two issues. We're saying goodbye to the 90s today, George. These issues specifically are December 1999 and January 2000. It's a whole new era. And you can tell that it's a whole new era because the back page of issue 91 just says snowmobiling.
So that's interesting because we're saying goodbye to the 90s just as we're saying hello to the 90s with issue 90 and 91. So the doors of Janus, the faces of Janus are ever unchanging.
Yeah. Kind of amazing that we got two issue 90 within the 90s. So
that's right.
Great job.
90 issues in the 90s. You know what? Great job. Honestly, great job getting to 90 issues of an independent comic at any point of any time.
True.
With any story. Spawn, I haven't done the math. There are a few that were running before Spawn that were still running last time I counted, like really independent things. But Spawn is definitely the longest running independent superhero comic today. Yes.
Independent comic, I think Cerebus still has it beat at this time.
It might.
Yeah.
It might. That's
Because
why I said
that
I
was-
hadn't done the math.
Because I think that was like Todd's big thing is like, well, if I can make it that far, that would be really cool.
Cerebus had 300 plus.
It also started like not coming out in like a regular sort of time frame. So, you know,
if you're counting issues
and you know what?
versus
and
years,
fuck that guy too.
Fuck that guy too. Fuck that guy too. You know, I will say this. Don't fuck Todd McFarlane. He's fine.
Comparatively?
He's a good guy, it seems.
Comparatively,
you know?
One thing that is happening in the world of Todd McFarlane is that so I don't know if we probably talked about it a little bit last year, but there was the whole cover contest. And then when the winners got announced, some of them were AI. And then there was like an interview with Todd where he was like, I don't know, like maybe AI art's going to be like the thing of the future. It's like a tool like anything else. And everybody's like, what? And he walked that back. He's walked that back since. He meant mostly like, you know, in the way he says things where like he just kind of says things and then
where he's like just speculating. I don't know. Maybe that'll be a thing that people do.
Yeah, exactly. And then he was like, no. Because one of the winners was AI art. Because it was like Violator or something. So like, I don't know, you could be convinced that like somebody had made it because the computer did a thing that like felt real enough.
Well, sure. The distortions that might be part of it, might be part of a generated image, feel more at home in something that is meant to be uncanny and weird.
Right, exactly. And so I guess it got through, but those issues are starting to come out now. And I don't know that the AI artist, from what I can tell, I can't find them on the internet anymore, and them defending themselves on the internet has seemingly disappeared as well. So
yeah, I'm sure
seems like that has been quashed. But the covers that have been announced that are coming out in the next couple months, they look cool. And congrats to those people again, the ones who did it truly and honestly. So that's really cool. The other thing, and here's like a weird thing to talk about. Maybe this is another fuck that guy situation. Have you seen the Kickstarter for the Stan Lee documentary? We haven't talked about this.
No, I haven't.
So there's this guy John Bolerjack. He's an artist, and he was like part of like Stan's like entourage. I've heard the name for a while, like 2016. I mean, Stan died like 10 years ago at this point, right? Almost.
Yes, close.
Getting close to it. Well, he's always alive in your impression.
Excelsior.
But the guy like sells a lot of his own artwork that Stan had signed, and he sells a lot of like memorabilia that Stan had given him, and a lot of it was signed.
Okay, that's right. That's how.
And it's all like a little weird, but a lot of comics pros this last couple weeks, because this Kickstarter came up and was like, I need $300,000 to finish a documentary that I'm making about the elder abuse that Stan was suffering.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And like now a lot of people are like, bro, how are you making a movie about this? Were you just watching while this happened and you didn't do anything? Were you also profiting off of it and now you're trying to distance yourself from it? But Todd put out a thing today saying like, hey, I knew Stan Lee for really, for many years. And I also know this guy, and he was a ray of light in Stan's world in a time of darkness. Because there was that thing about
Stan Lee being the victim of elder abuse is very true.
Yes.
Of all the things Stan was guilty of himself, in the end of his life, he was deeply abused by the people around him, and that sucks.
Yeah. So, but there's a lot of like Roy Thomas has come forward, and Mark Waid and Todd McFarlane, and so many people have been like, this guy's okay. Like, but the other side of it is a lot of people being like, what? It feels weird that he needs like $300,000 to finish a movie. So.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That's not excessive for a documentary. That's also not that little for a doc. I mean, $300,000 to finish a documentary. That's probably about right for an independent doc. Like that's not having to, if he's already got material, we don't need to get into the nitty gritty of film production, but that's not that preposterous for an independent documentary as a sum.
Well, hopefully that it is not another instance of Stan's legacy being taken advantage of. As fraught as that legacy may be, we're not going to get into the, you know,
The well trod and well documented stories about Stanley and his collaborators. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but you know, that's another thing happening. Oh, and then also on the on r/spawn, somebody posted like an AI clip, and shout out to the Spawn community because everybody was like, "This shit's trash." And
fuck yeah, Spawn community, you
so,
go.
one thing I
You
really
go.
do.
Am I a fucking housewife in 1998? Am I the audience of Ellen right now? Wow.
Listen,
You go, Spawn community. That's going on a shirt.
these are the last issues that you can do that for because it's the 2000s after this. So I can no
That's right.
longer tag
That's right.
the episodes with 90s comics. It's a 2000s comics, baby. Usually we do get pretty into the nitty gritty of these issues. We will probably summarize quite a bit more. We will be reading a lot less from.
You will understand why instantly, audience.
Yeah.
You will know and you'll be like, oh, okay, I get it. So, yeah, before we start getting into why and what that is, Pierce, hit me with those credits for Spawn number 90.
All right, great. Spawn number 90. Todd McFarlane and Image Comics present Three Uses of the Knife. Plot by Brian Holguin, Todd McFarlane, story by Brian Holguin, penciler Greg Capullo, inker Danny Miki and Lee Matsunami, copy editor and lettering by Tom Warzikowski, colors by Dan Kemp and Brian Haberlin, cover art by Greg Capullo and Todd McFarlane, dedicated to Tim Burton. And this is because the Sleepy Hollow movie would have come out right around this time, and who had the license for the toys but McFarlane Toys.
Great.
Yeah. So, some trigger warning for our discussion, I guess. This issue, surprise, surprise, features violence against a woman, but also
a lot of racism,
pretty racist.
A lot of slurs, it's just bad. So, okay, here's what this issue is. This is a Rashomon. For anyone who doesn't know what a Rashomon is, that's a term derived from the 1950 film Rashomon by Akira Kurosawa, in which 3 different suspects of a murder tell their side of the story, each with their own perspective on what happened. It is a format that I don't know I can credit that film with creating. I'm not going to go that far.
It's the shorthand for it these days, though.
But it is certainly the one that has popularized it in culture. And that is, when someone says, oh, it's a Rashomon, they're referring to that film and they're referring to this plot device where 3 different perspectives on a single event are given. And someone, usually an outside arbiter, determines which of them or what parts of each story is true. And that's what happens here. And Pierce, if you don't mind, I'm just going to blast through it in about 30 seconds.
Yeah, you can.
So basically, there's an abandoned house where 3 young white men are standing over the body of an Asian woman, arguing over what they're going to do over this woman who has been murdered with a bloody knife that is also present. Spawn shows up, tasks each one of them with giving their side of the story. One of them claims that they plan to assault her for racist reasons, and he explains it very racistly. There are a lot of slurs. It's not great. One of them claims that he was not part of it, that there was a gang that he saw that did the murder that escaped, a gang of black men who he again describes extremely racistly, in very racist terms. I'm making Spawn visibly uncomfortable in the comic through his mask. And finally, one who claims he wasn't involved at all, that the other 2 have totally framed him for any involvement. Spawn hears all 3 sides of the story, turns to the one who says he wasn't involved at all, and says, now you can prove that you're innocent by murdering your 2 friends. Crazy, right? Well, you'll get to understand why in a second, because as soon as he starts stabbing them, which he does with no hesitation, they're laying there, and one of them is moaning and saying, well, like I said, we just held her. We didn't do the murder. And Spawn says, I know, that's why you got off easy. As for you, and he grabs the guy with the knife, he says, you're coming with me. And that's the end of the issue. He drags him up the stairs. Him dragging him up the stairs is the coolest piece of art in the whole thing. There's the sideways splash panel of the dead woman, which, while well rendered, is an upsetting image.
Yep.
Honestly, the actual contents of this issue, pretty fucked up.
Yeah, I think that there's some, if we talk about this purely from a artistic standpoint, not the writing itself, but
Right,
just
from a purely mechanical storytelling.
yeah, some of the
aspect.
panels are actually, I mean, there's some interesting panel layouts, the stuff he does with, the stuff Greg does with like using the reflection in the knife in a couple of panels is kind of fun.
All the renderings of Spawn are great
Really
throughout.
cool.
He's
Really
got that
cool.
horror movie monster vibe that he's come to embody. There are some great panel layouts, the storytelling devices, how they lay out each person's perspective, the actual mechanical way it's laid out, I think is great. It's really impossible to go too deep into it though, because nearly every panel has some kind of racism in the script, or sexism in the script, or homophobia in the script. It's just one of those things that in the late 90s, right around the turn of 2000, a lot of folks were really taking liberties with the kind of way they were depicting each other, particularly white people depicting non-white people, and the language they were using to do that.
Yeah. Now it's one of those things where I was explaining what we were covering to Vanessa a little while ago, and I was like, oh yeah, we're covering these issues, and this first one's kind of rough. And I was like, it's not that like the issue itself is intending to be racist, it's that the characters themselves are racist. But unfortunately,
Yes.
it's a little bit hard to separate the two in this case, because it's not like, and I get that the point of Spawn is that it's a little edgy and it's a little like mature readers-y, and like
Right.
they don't like, asterisk out the slurs and stuff.
It's very Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, this is definitely edginess for edginess' sake, much like how Quentin Tarantino tends to at least get one white character who's usually played by him to say the N-word.
Well, like I said, white storytellers taking liberties with the language they're using to try and depict racism. Now, here's the thing. Before we were recording, you and I were chatting just a bit, conferring about the story, and you were saying, you don't see what the point of this is, and I had an answer for you, which I didn't tell you then. I was saving it for now. We can get into a little bit. One, I think it's just to do the Rashomon mechanic, because I think it's a storytelling thing that at a certain point almost every storyteller thinks I bet I could do a cool version of that.
Yeah.
Or maybe you need an idea and you go, I guess I'll do a Rashomon.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the bottle episode from sitcoms where they're all stuck in a room for the whole episode, so you can build tension for 30 or 22 minutes or whatever. Yeah. I get that. I get the creative urge to do the Rashomon. I don't fault it. I don't even fault the execution of, again, the mechanical storytelling device. Mm-hmm. Second, as listeners of our previous episode, which covered Spawn dealing with a guy who was abusing his stepdaughter,
right,
and a guy who was buying and proliferating child sexual exploitation material. This is the other side of that coin from Spawn Across America, where he had the issue about child abuse and how Spawn handled that, and he fucked it up.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have an issue that deals directly with racism and how Spawn deals with these three people who have committed a murder ostensibly for racist reasons. When you look at the story told by the second guy who says that he didn't have anything to do with the actual murder, he just participated in the leading up, like the preluding assault,
right,
because of his racism towards the undefined Asian identity of the victim, because they are very racist about not knowing where she's,
right,
what her heritage is and all that stuff. the typical like all Asian people look the same to white people, racist garbage. When you look at that story, that is the story that was true.
Right.
So their racism in this crime is real. This was a real racist hate crime done by 3 people. And so I think it is a response to that KKK issue where Spawn again does a weird thing. In this one, he does the same thing he did to the fucking guy who was abusing his stepdaughter and impales the guy who held the knife and initiated the murder, throws him right off the building onto a spike, as we'll see in the next issue, at the opening of the next issue. Spoiler alert. But
I hear you and I understand, and obviously the mechanical aspect of it, like, oh, I want to do a Rashomon. Cool. Totally get it. Totally understand that being like, oh, it's time to do this sort of thing.
Right.
And also,
this is the story I'll do now.
And I do understand it's 60 issues later. We have a new writer who, let's take another stab at this. Presumably Brian Holguin's a fan, right? So, he read that issue and was like, oh, I can do like my kind of version of this, but it can't be the same. I think I enjoyed how quickly it was done in the last issue with the older gentleman and the child pornography. The way that, because it's communicated so quickly, we get it. Like, I don't know that, and it's funny because one of the letters is essentially going to say a similar thing, which is, and this is what I have in common with a 17-year-old in 1999, I suppose, but which is like, hey, Todd, why do you keep repeating yourself? And I think that, and also, why are you kind of drawing things out as we get to 100, right? Something's supposed to happen in 100. What's taking so long? I appreciate the second issue we're going to cover a little bit more because at least like something new happens. This issue, while it is like an interesting exercise, I suppose, again, from a purely mechanical standpoint, not the content itself. Okay, I wonder if like we saw longer runs in superhero comics these days, because we typically don't, right, for many characters. I wonder if we would see more of this kind of stuff in modern comics more often, where it's like, oh, it's time to do the pizza dog episode,
Right. Like a standalone kind of idea. Look, I 100% agree with what you're saying, that in the execution here, I don't know that I really needed or wanted to read 22 pages or whatever, 20 pages or whatever it is, of just slurs and racism and stuff.
Yeah.
Even if it's meant to be a commentary against those people, as it ultimately is. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily want to experience a white person's racism in order to know that white people are racist. Quite frankly, I grew up in the American Southeast. I have been experiencing that almost every minute of every day of my life, understanding the racism of other white people and being invited into it. I think, I've talked about this before, and I'm sure there is an experience that you've had as well that comes from a different perspective of your own region and the place you lived. But where I live and where I mostly grew up, you are, as a white person, especially a white person who's been assigned male at birth, always being invited, giving what I will call, and I don't think I'm coining this term, micro invitations into racism.
Sure.
There's microaggressions, ways that people know that they're being judged and perceived and prejudiced against because of the subtle actions of other people. Well, there are ways as a white person that another person wants you to be racist with them. And I've been experiencing that all the time forever. It's not really interesting or exciting or frankly entertaining on any level to me anymore to experience that.
Yeah.
And there's also the second layer of this being a graphic telling of an assault against a woman multiple times. Again.
I think that might be the part that I have the biggest problem with. Not that it's, I'm not trying to say that anything is racism is bad. Everything's bad. It's all bad. I'm not trying to say that any is like more, or we're not trying to grade these things against each other. What I'm mostly trying to say is like, we see violence against women in this comic constantly.
It
Women
is.
just do not live in the world of Spawn, and it is exhausting.
And when we see children being hurt, they're usually young girls at this point. That's something I want to talk about, you know? Okay, I want to talk about this right now. And this is a bigger discussion than just Spawn. This is certainly a bigger discussion than Spawn in the 90s. But this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, especially as we've been covering this. And I think, given that there's not a lot to dig into in the contents in particular of this issue, beyond the analysis we've just given it, I want to ask you a question. You're always asking me questions, and I appreciate it, and I think it leads to great discussions between us. I have a question for you.
Sure.
This is what I've been thinking about. What are the ways, and how do you show quote unquote mature edginess in a story without falling back on the same tropes of just saying a racist, edgy thing or hurting a woman? What are the ways that you can do that in a story? What are the things that the devices that can be used to really communicate the same level of a diabolical character and a dire situation that don't do that? And I'm not saying, and I'm not asking this because I think there aren't any. I'm asking this because I think there are so many.
I think that that's the thing. It's just not. It's not even that it's uh, annoying to me, or that I think it's. I think it's just kind of lazy. It's just lazy the amount of times that we find like a woman bleeding out in an alleyway, a woman bleeding out in a basement, a woman in a cage, whatever. Because at this point, there is so much potential for what Spawn could be and the way that it could comment on evil. And and you know what? I definitely in past, episodes of this show have been like, I don't know why we're doing this thing with the worms and the rats and the whatever, right? And like, I might be coming back around to being like, I don't know. I think I'd maybe rather have a little bit of the metaphor. Something really interesting that I saw today. I saw the new Soderbergh movie Black Bag last night. Really like it if you
Yeah,
like
okay.
spycrafty kind of talkies.
Okay.
It's fun. If you like Soderbergh, you'll probably dig it. But Soderbergh, then my brother sent me like a clip where he talked about making political films and how he's like, I think right now I can't make a political film. He said, I don't think anybody can, because I don't think that you can fictionalize the thing that, like, there's no metaphor anymore. Look at what's happening in real life. And I
Right.
think maybe, and I'm 11 years old when this issue comes out, right? Like maybe I just don't have the context for what's going on in the world in the same way. But like maybe the feeling between Todd and Brian Holguin and Greg Capullo is like, well, we just have to show the thing that's out there, because showing the metaphor for it isn't going to be enough. And I think that that's maybe part of it, is like, hey, and we see it in the letters columns constantly. You're showing the real thing that's out there. You're showing the real world. And we've scoffed at that a bunch, but it's beginning to kind of like dawn on me that like maybe just showing the real thing and showing that there is this hellish avenger out there to deal with the thing in the most gruesome, brutal way possible is like a little bit of the release that people are looking for, or at least the main audience for this book, which is like, generally, teenagers and early 20s comics fans.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean I think you're on nail on the head with a lot of that. And I think that there's this version of maturity that by the late 90s had crystallized in comics because of the comics of the 80s that were seen as extremely and groundbreakingly mature, like Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, stories like that had elevated levels of violence and sexuality. So violence and sexuality become the immature story's version of a mature story.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's something I think about a lot, and I think you're very right about the whole like the worms and the wolves and all that stuff. That was at least an interesting way to be like, this is a horror, edgy, spooky, scary book without just having it being drenched in the blood of like a young woman every issue, because it's also starting to, as you said, just feel kind of lazy and repetitive. Like there are so many versions of evil, and we've really only had Spawn tapping into like a few. I think, especially as the person that Al Simmons used to be. There are a lot of ways he could explore other things, you know? I think there are a lot of ways he could explore the evil done to, say, the night people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That would be a very interesting direction for Spawn to take his current crusade. It's one of those things that just gets tiring. And I think there are a lot of people for whom people who get called like woke and offended and all that stuff, when a lot of the time we're just tired of it. We're just
Yeah.
tired of the same shit over and over. You're comfortable, not you, but like the people who say those ignorant descriptions of people who are just sick of seeing the same, you know, shit that puts them down over and over. Those are the I'm kind of rambling, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, of course.
The ignorant people saying that are
They're not affected by it in the same way, so they don't see what the big deal is. But when it's something that you're
well, and they're comfortable with seeing it over and over because
right,
it doesn't affect
maybe
them.
because
That's
they
what I was
become
trying to say.
desensitized to it. And I would hope in my life that I would never. On one hand, I'm like a little bit happy that it is affecting me because I'm like, man, I'm so glad that I'm not so desensitized to this that I'm just like glossing over it. Like, yep, here we go, you know. And also
Right.
too, we tend to we're reading this book a lot faster than it came out. And
Yeah.
this is, again, something we'll get into in the back matter. So we'll put a pin in this slightly. But like Todd kind of says, because a reader says, hey, I just read the first 70 issues. Why do you do this? Why do you do this? Why do you do this? And Todd kind of goes, because you're not meant to read it that way. Like,
Yeah.
I do the things I do because you probably didn't read the last issue except for 30 days ago. And that's interesting because I do think that storytelling, especially in comics, has very much changed as writing for the trade has very much become the norm.
Right.
You're
The level of decompression.
right, but you're writing now for somebody's going to read this in 6 issues, like all in one sitting, right? And
Yeah.
so the way that we explore different themes even becomes very different. The repetition becomes very different. The compression or decompression of the story becomes very different. It's very funny to, on one hand, be like, well, pretty compressed storytelling here, right? We get a lot of one and dones, but at the same time, we're very much like dragging things along because it feels like these episodes could be inserted anywhere in the season, right? This issue does not have to happen here. There's like, you could throw it, it feels like, I'm not saying this because I know, but it feels like you could throw this 100 issues later and it would pretty much read the same.
Right.
Granted, Jim Downing is Spawn at that point, and I'm not going to
Etc.
get
Yeah,
into
but
it.
no, but you have the same. But the point you're making remains, which is that this isn't an issue that's like highly tied to a specific concept of Spawn.
Right.
It's just a very broad Spawn issue, and you know, there is a level of shorthand that Spawn uses in this era that I think a lot of media was using and still uses.
Mm-hmm.
That is the sort of afraid of cities trope, where the Julianification of New York and like the seedy parts of New York, part of what it did for some people was highlight that until whatever, those places still existed. And there are people who still today truly believe that if they went to Queens, New York City, where you live,
Yeah.
every day of your life, they would be stepping into a war zone like Fallujah with like rubble everywhere and drug dealers shooting each other and like gunfights in the street and like unsafe to walk at night. There are people who truly, truly cling to that idea and that ideal of what the quote real world that they're not actually experiencing is. And I think you're right that it also leads to Spawn being sort of the anti boogeyman, where it's like there's a level of catharsis and satisfaction in seeing these people, these evil people, doing deeds that, unless you're one of them, we all agree are despicable.
Right.
Pay the ultimate price like this.
And also it allows Spawn to have pretty brutal methods, right? Because it's accepted that that's what would need to happen. That's what you would need to do. It's unfortunately, it is very unfortunately the kind of thinking that I think when it carries through in a bad way, where you're like, oh, I have to meet force with an equal and opposite force,
Right.
leads to some pretty bad things in current reality. that don't make
Right.
any sense when you think
Right.
about them more deeply. And Spawn being a superhero comic, nuance is not necessarily its strong suit, as we've learned, and and it's unfair of us to try to put that at its feet because it is limited in what it can do. It is limited. It is partly limited, I would say, by the talents of the folks writing the stories. I think Todd McFarlane has gotten much better writing stories than he did at the top. Brian Holguin, it's a little tough. We have seen a slight shift as he has gotten more scripting credit, like more plot and story credit, where we're like,
Right.
okay, he's definitely trying to experiment a little bit more, but it's clear that when he's taking over more of the scripting itself, he's not trying to do a Todd impression quite as much, and he's trying to push the
Right.
book into something a little bit different, which is understandable, but also too, like, who's Brian Holguin, right? Like, I like, if like truly, if you look him up now, what has his long term impact in comics been? Just been Spawn, and it's kind of one of those situations where it's like, well, if you're under the tutelage of somebody who's like not a master, then it's almost impossible that you will become one. Um, and
Yeah.
we have arguably already seen Spawn in the hands of writers of great talent, and so there's this kind of push and pull. There's a push and pull that I'm really feeling 100 issues, almost 100 issues
Yeah.
in,
I agree.
especially as I think back about like, okay, what was I complaining about before? And like, now what are my complaints? And also, as we've read Curse of the Spawn, I think that that's another important aspect of it, because this issue specifically does feel like it could have been a Curse of the Spawn type of thing
Yeah, it almost does.
in its and I've said this before, like screenwriter 101y type like
Right.
deal, and the Rashomon thing being a little bit on the nose for that. But yeah, it is. Sometimes Spawn is the sum of its parts more than it is a whole, and this feels a little bit more like the sum of its parts. Um,
And I just want to circle back slightly
yeah.
to what I agree completely with everything you just said. And to circle back just slightly to what I was saying before about the people with the perception of being like afraid of cities
Mhm.
and stuff. The inverse of that is those same people love cops. And the reason why is the SVU effect.
Mm.
Every week they sit down for the last 37 years or whatever the fuck it's been and watched an episode of SVU where someone who is the victim of sexual assault or some sort of intimate partner violence
Yeah.
or something along those lines is given the full investigation of the best agents of the NYPD and people whose loved ones, even if they have experienced or if they have experience of assault themselves, who don't have any experience with what it's like to actually go through that kind of investigation or even try to get an investigation to happen, are really believing that like there are people out there who are like make it their mission every day to hit the streets and find out what happened to this young woman that happens to young women and people of all genders everywhere
Yeah.
every day. It's just that to kind of circle back to the end of 90 here, it's that idea that there is some level of metaphysical retribution that can be counted on, or at the very least, a version of human retribution that will be there to make things right. And it's sometimes frustrating when you are taken out of the superhero part of it to actual real world stuff in a way that is not what I think is intended, where we're asked to be entertained by just, again, 22 pages of sexual violence and racism.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I end up on Spawn 90.
Yeah. Would you like to move on to Spawn number 91?
Oh, I'm all ready. Would you?
Welcome to the 2000s.
You know what? I know where I was. I remember the New Year's Eve of 2000. I was having a makeout party with my friends because I was 16 years old.
Nice. I don't remember because I was 11. So anyway, I guess we all were pretty happy that our computers still worked and everything. I do remember that.
We were at my friend's house having like I said, a makeout party. Not strictly that, but when you're 16 and you're all kind of hormonal, it gets into that pretty easily. Um, we were all chilling and like having a good time, dancing to music, too close, whatever, in our friend's basement. And her dad just cut the power to the whole house right at midnight. And everybody was like, "What? No! Oh my god!" And then he turned it back on, and it was honestly pretty
That's
solid
pretty
prank.
good dad joke. Great job.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that's going to lead us to Spawn number 91. Todd McFarlane Image Comics present Black Cat Bones, Part 1. Plot by Brian Holguin and Todd McFarlane. Story by Brian Holguin. Penciler Greg Capullo. Inker Danny Miki and Lee Matsunami. Copy editor and lettering by Tom Warzakowski. Colors by Dan Kemp and Brian Haberlin. Cover art by Greg and Todd. Dedicated to my boy Jake. Jake McFarlane was born at the end of Spawn number 90. We get a photo of him.
Oh, great.
He's smaller than a Vern Troyer, Austin Powers figurine or whatever.
Wow. Well,
Todd's
what a
holding
little
him.
guy.
So
You know what? Congrats to the
yeah,
Toddster.
I guess he's 25 now. So
Wow.
that's
I guess I'm almost 42 now.
So I have a question for you. You mentioned that so the last issue ends with Spawn spiriting the one gentleman away. Gentleman's a kind word.
Yeah.
Who committed the murder. However, they were in Elmhurst, Illinois.
Oh, yeah, I guess you're right that this is not the same guy. I just had it in my head that this was the aftermath of the previous issue.
Here's the thing. Also, where the fuck is Spawn going?
He's going all over the place. You remember in last issue when they had
said
the...
that he was like moving around a lot. So like maybe he just brought the guy to Santa Monica with him? Because that's where we open here.
Yeah, I think this is a different thing.
Okay.
I think that's a different guy. I think I got that wrong. So listeners of 28 minutes ago or whenever I said that, this is me correcting myself now. I just assumed it was because of the storytelling.
Would make sense.
But it's not. It's just a different place. He's in Santa Monica. He's in Santa Monica, California.
Oh, your favorite band.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Nick Cave recently, I don't know if I said that, he recently walked back that statement and said he actually likes the Red Hot Chili Peppers or whatever, but not me. Fuck them all. I don't like any of them, not even Flea.
Whoa. What about In Point Break?
I mean, he's fine in movies, I guess. Anthony Kiedis is in Point Break, where he plays a fucking white supremacist like assaulter. So
maybe that was.
I guess I'm fine with that.
That was the inspiration for the last issue. We're in Santa Monica, and over the screams of sirens, I can hear waves crashing on the beach, the murmuring of the crowd, the screech of tires. My face burns, but my hands are freezing. I can't feel anything at all below my waist. I can't turn my head, and I'm afraid if I close my eyes, they'll never open again. So I just stare up at him, and he stares back.
I think that's the guy impaled on the thing,
which is pretty
good.
That's a good bit.
Yeah.
That's fun. And yeah, we turn the page. We get this splash of Spawn standing above above an abandoned building, where this guy has been impaled on a trident in a fountain, and the cops are there.
It's more like a Santa Cruz type fountain with like Poseidon on it and stuff.
I thought that, I was kind of thinking that the vibe of this was kind of supposed to be Lost Boys-y.
Which is also Santa Cruz. I mean, Santa Carla is directly based on Santa Cruz. Yeah. Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, one of my favorite places in the world. It is pretty cool to go if you are a goth in the summer.
Hell yeah. Well, we're gonna meet another California goth.
California.
And this Chris Angel looking motherfucker.
Well, you say Chris Angel, but I told you. This is just straight up Richard Ramirez. It is straight up. Look up a picture of him. That's his face. He has the carving of the pentagram on his hand instead of in real life on his hand, but in this he has it on his chest.
Oh yeah, he was the same guy.
He was the California freeway killer, the Night Stalker who drove up and down between Los Angeles. or actually San Diego and San Francisco, and murdered and assaulted people and did all kinds of crazy shit, and was so high the whole time that he started to believe that he was Satan, or at least akin to Satan. A lot of the stuff that Mark, as they call him because of the mark of the beast here,
Mm-hmm.
will say throughout this is almost directly verbatim. Well, not verbatim, but very directly inspired by the statement that Richard Ramirez gave in court when he was sentenced, where he basically just stood up in front of the court and was like, none of you will ever understand me because I am a level of, I'm a being far beyond all of you, and I've experienced sensations and things that you will never understand. None of you can judge me because none of you are on my level. And that's basically, it goes deeper than that. But throughout this, Mark is talking about like he's a wolf and they're sheep and they're all, whatever. It's just straight up Richard Ramirez, except that he's got like a little cult around him almost.
Yeah, we that makes a lot of sense. The implication in this is also that he does have like powers.
Yeah.
He does. The reason he has this cult around him is because he has this power of persuasion that nobody is able to resist, seemingly.
He kind of does a Jedi mind trick on a guy at a bouncer where he's like, the guy says, I need to see your ID. And he just straight up goes, you don't need to see my ID.
Yeah.
But yeah, first off, we're seeing the cops find a dead cat outside of like a church. And Mark and his buddy here, Diz, are watching from across the street, marveling at how freaked out they are by their handiwork of a dead cat. They wander off to the grocery store, or the bodega rather, where they have a racist interaction with the guy at the counter.
Yep.
And then they head back out to the flop house where Mark and his kind of weird cultish gang of people stay. Now, in real life, Richard Ramirez stayed at hotels. There are a couple in particular famous ones that he stayed at. They were like kind of short stay hotels or extended stay hotels. And he would just come in and out every few days, do a bunch of fucking drugs, and then go out and like try to commit a crime again or whatever. So he didn't have like a cult at all. He just was a kind of a cult of one. He was actually caught by citizens. He was caught trying to assault someone in this neighborhood in, I want to say East Los Angeles. Or no, it wasn't. It was in Texas, because he had driven home from California to Texas. And he tried to assault someone on the street, and all the neighbors ran out and just beat the living shit out of him. And he let the cops take him because the neighbors just fucking were like, we know this is the Night Stalker. His face was just on TV.
Damn.
Anyway, interesting story. Fuck that guy too. Fuck Richard Ramirez.
It's like the theme of the episode.
Yeah, this is very much a Richard Ramirez like analog, down to, as I said, straight up what his face looks like.
Yeah, he does look quite similar. But we're gonna meet Shauna, who is basically trying to join up with what Mark here has got going on.
Yeah, she's like a young punk girl who we get from context has told her mom she's leaving home. She asks her friend if she has a place to crash, and she says, well, if Mark likes you, you can stay at the commune, basically.
Yeah, and he's immediately wary of her showing up. He says, spoiled white kids who are handed everything their whole lives are always the most unhappy. That should tell you something.
Oh, sorry. Renee is the goth girl. Shauna is the girl who's already...
Oh, you're right. Yeah, Renee. So he basically... He kind of like tests her. Like he's just kind of like poking and prodding at her verbally, and then he's like, "Okay, well, here I have a test for you, and I'm gonna drop this cigarette between both our arms, and if you don't move before it burns out, you're in. If you flinch, you got to go home."
I will say real quick, just to quickly note, she tells him that she knows Shauna, the other girl that was there, and she knows Ricky,
right?
And that will be a thing later, Ricky. But yeah, they do the cigarette challenge thing, She flinches when it burns her, and he slaps her, tells her to get the hell out of there. He says, I want you to remember something. You failed because you are weak. The strong prey on the weak. It's the oldest law in creation. It's the only sacred truth left in this world. This world is a will to power and nothing else. I mean, that's just basically Richard Ramirez ramblings.
Yeah.
Straight up. And we soon cut to Manhattan, where Spawn is lurking in an alley outside of a theater where a woman is trying to get her tickets to a show. Her son wanders off and his eyes go green. Suddenly he's possessed by, I believe it's Mammon.
Yeah.
Though, once again, we still don't technically know that name.
Yeah.
But we're giving it to him anyway because we know who that character is, and it's just easier that way. You won't have to... This way, in 40 issue episodes or whatever, when we finally talk about him, you won't have to be like, who the fuck was that again?
There will be a quiz.
There will be a quiz every episode, by the way. If you haven't been paying attention and staying on for the quizzes, make sure you listen extra long. So this little kid is like, Simmons, and he kind of freaks out. He kind of speaks to him all freaky in this weird creep voice, and he's like, you've been busy, Simmons. Don't think we haven't noticed.
And Spawn is just like, listen, like, I'm not hiding. Get out of that kid's body. Go back to where you came from. Tell your master stop wasting my time. Like, Spawn at this point just wants nothing to do with anything. He doesn't care about this. He's made this clear that he does not care about the heaven and hell stuff. But this more resolved Spawn is just like, listen, I'm doing my thing. Leave me alone.
And you don't have any power against me right now is kind of his thing. So the kid, the devil leaves his body, and he catches up with his mom, who's like, where were you? And he says, I was just looking at the posters. We see a movie poster for The Creech 2, Optimistic.
Hey, The Creech 3 is coming soon.
That's right. I think this was probably about the time of The Creech 2, the comic.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, that was but not being worked on, and now he's now in real time, in our actual time, Creech 3 will be a thing.
Then back in Santa Monica, California,
I'm really glad that this guy's not long for this book, because
I know.
I don't know if I could deal with this.
Yeah, now you understand why they suck so bad, how much I fucking hate them. Because even stuff that's like 1% like the fucking Chili Pepper, without even the shitty doop bass or whatever in there, like even that is ear poison, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So back in Santa Monica, California, we catch up back with Mark, who is in the basement of his flop house doing a ritual. It's that whole monologue that Pierce gifted us with at the beginning of the episode, where it ends with him speaking a word in some glyph sigil language that's like, pretty cool work from old Tom Warzakowski.
Yeah. And we see the pentagram on the ground, and we see a cage, and all these things will become relevant, because when you set things up, you got to pay them off. And later that night,
they go out to a club, and this is where he does his, like, you don't need to see my ID. And he's like kind of hypnotizing people who are smoking dope. And he has a run-in with this big guy. The big guy's going to kick his ass. But then he says, hey, man, are you okay? Mark says, hey, man, are you okay? There's something in your mouth. Yeah, in your throat, in your belly, dude. They're crawling all over you. And he spits up worms. And he starts rolling on the ground going, get them off me, get them off me. But there are no actual worms. It is basically straight up the scene from Lost Boys, where he's like, you're eating worms, Michael.
They're only noodles.
You're eating worms.
It's also like what Spawn did to the Exterminator.
Yes, it's very similar. Yeah. Except that this guy's just Mark is hypnotizing this guy. That's a movie that really keyed me in on the fact that I'm definitely bisexual. that there's a lot of gay in me.
The sax man.
Like, I just wanted to hang out with those fucking vampires in their weird circle jerk eating bowls of dicks or whatever. I was just like, sounds fucking 2000 to me, baby. But yeah, he kind of hypnotizes this guy. Then he goes outside and he runs into none other than Renee. Renee is trying to get a drug dealer of some kind to spot her. We've all been there. He says absolutely not, and walks away. And she's kind of like, well, screw you. Just as she's kind of like having this bad encounter, who should show up but Mark, who was so shitty to her earlier. I want to say, while we're in this sequence, I love the colors through this whole sequence. The blues and pinks and the like club lights and everything. It's bringing in some really nice hues that we don't usually get in Spawn, that are heightening the mood in a way that is advanced for a lot of what we get in the coloring lately. There are none of those hot brown patches. This is just, again, the club scene in particular just really kicks ass to me. I'm like I said, I'm into the bisexual mood lighting, so it really works. But there's also the digital like flare colors and stuff. It just looks great.
You know, the reason that it works, though, it's something that we've called out before, that instead of those like piss yellows and browns, the backgrounds are black. There's a lot of contrast on the page, and it allows you to be a little bit more experimental with some of those colors.
It's a deep black just set off by those hot color lights.
Yeah, and it just really, it really helps, and it helps like smaller details really sing as well. So, yeah, the club scene could be like the club scene. There is a bit of there's a lot of digital coloring there, and that oftentimes is a recipe for disaster. But they're really figuring it out, and
this works great.
Really using the tools.
The 3-panel sequence where she's talking to the dealer, I love the circle lights with the different colors in them on the wall. It's just really selling the environment and the atmosphere. Yeah. So Mark shows up and she's like, leave me alone. Why are you an ass? And he's like, look, I was hard on you because we have to be real careful with the house. One screw up can ruin it for everyone. But I got balls. You got balls. I'll give you that. Oh, and she says, they call you Mark of the Beast. I heard you're a devil worshiper. And he says, me, I worship no one, but I respect anyone who has true power, which is a very satanic thing.
So she takes him back, or he takes her back to the squat where he lives, and we see his books of witchcraft and evil spells, which is my favorite book.
Yeah.
I like that.
Lost Incantations is the other one.
That it's specifically evil spells. Like, presumably the other volume is like good spells.
Right, exactly. Exactly. You have to choose one when you make your character.
And he's got like porn on the walls and stuff too. And he... You know, she was looking for a fix, so he has something to share with her called laudanum, which I did not know was real, but it is real.
Oh yeah, laudanum. Yep.
It's opium essentially mixed with like alcohol. So
it's like old school painkiller.
Yeah.
Like early surgical like dowsing tool, or dosing tool, and she kind of like takes it and passes out, and she's like, I feel dreamy. He recites Kubla Khan. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alf the sacred river ran through caverns measureless to man down to a sunless sea, which, as he explains here, is Samuel Taylor Coleridge. It tells her he had this fragment of a poem when he woke up from this laudanum dream and couldn't remember the rest, and spent the rest of his life trying to figure it out and finish the poem. I think that's certainly the story behind the story about it.
That poem is also where Alf from TV gets his name.
So. Yes, 100%. Yes, 100%. This is, well, Kubla Khan is the origin of Alf, which is why the dad of the family that Alf lives with is Kubla Khan.
Right.
If you've always wondered why Kubla Khan is in that show.
Yeah. Welcome to Alfography.
You know, the set of Alf was a fucking death trap where, like, because they had the live puppet, every set, the floor was basically a maze of cutouts. and like actors were constantly taking a wrong step backwards and like
Oh,
falling
shit.
into the holes and shit and ruining takes and getting hurt. They had to follow like extremely careful blocking. Also, Paul Fusco, who is Alf, refused to appear in public as Paul Fusco for like 20 years. He would only appear as Alf with the puppet.
Jesus.
Yeah, man.
All right. Well,
I can tell you a lot about Alf.
save it for our other podcast. So,
Alphography.
yeah. So,
Welcome to the Alf community.
damn it. So
That's
we
even worse.
make it to 3 a.m., the devil's midnight, and
The devil's midnight.
just
I'm sure that's a phrase, but that sounds like the Lost Motley Crue album. That sounds like the Motley Crue reunion album
so
with Vince Neil.
Renee,
Devil's midnight.
Renee is not feeling so well, and she opens a door to not a bathroom, but the room where Mark was doing his ritual. And we see the cage, and she, I don't know why after throwing up she decides to open up a body bag. That's an interesting thing to want to
She
do.
opens up the bag,
But
yep,
she
and who's
sees
inside but
her friend Ricky. It's the decomposing body.
But yeah, she sees Ricky in the body bag, and he's covered in the worms and the dirt of the earth. I guess he was evil. And that's what this story is saying. That is Todd McFarlane's true belief, that you will only decompose if you are evil.
I guess so. I don't know.
Okay.
It just.
No, I think that's true. I'm going to hold myself to that.
All right.
I'll hold myself to that standard.
And now that she's in there, this gives Mark the opportunity to complete a ritual, essentially. And I don't love this because he's gutting another cat, which sucks.
Yeah, that's tough, but
some time has passed.
I do kind of like I love his whole dialogue here where he says, I didn't lie to her. I really am trying to get someone's attention.
Yeah.
I can feel him out there slipping between the shadows, coming like an avenging ghost, coming for me. Where he's like trying to lure Spawn in. I like that. I like that. And I like that Spawn then arrives. He guts the cat, unfortunately. He says another weird magic word. And he says, yeah, he's coming for me. I can't wait. And then he says, he's here. And Spawn, sure enough, is materializing in the darkness. Again, want to point to how fucking great the coloring on that panel of Spawn fading in from the darkness is.
It's awesome.
Where his eyes are all glowing and hot, and the color on his cape is kind of fading out into the shadows. They've been doing that kind of gray-red color gradient lately, and it's really working for me. Like, it looks great.
Yeah. I also think that they're really leaning into the living cape a lot more. I know that we've had some recent like Dead Zone stuff, so we've been seeing the cape in a lot of different contexts. But even in the last issue, it was like seeping down the stairs, kind of like water almost. It's really cool. Just having a lot of fun with it. I like how it also echoes the blood and guts on the page next to it, sort of. As a nice little like kind of balance to the page.
The red is really working, and the coolness of the background's colors with the deepness of the blacks and the shadow blacks. Again, that panel of Spawn fading out of the shadow is mostly black, and that's why it works.
Yeah, it's great.
I love the narration. He says he's here, he's magnificent, focus, discipline. He's sizing me up. He'll try to read my thoughts. Discipline, focus. There's a girl in the next room. I'm going to kill her. And sure enough, Spawn reads his thoughts, throws him to the side, busts into the room. There's Renee, and she's kind of nude in or in her underwear in the cage. Don't love that she's been stripped down or whatever. Yeah. I do love the cartooning of her face. It's a very like, oh my God, like anime type, like freaked out face from Greg Capullo. Yeah. It's just very abstract, and I like that detail.
Yeah. And I like the next page too, where she's scared inside the cage, and she's like, "Get this away from me." We can see that she's got these like markings, sigils and markings like scrawled on her, and Spawn lets her know that she's safe. She's under his protection, but she's scared of him, and Mark sets something on fire, and it
It's
the flames
the
lick
sigil on the ground.
right, and the flames lick up into Spawn's cape even, and he's standing in the
I want to
middle of
say
the
from here on
pentagram.
out, don't love the cartooning anymore on Renee. This panel where it gets closer and it's still trying to do the wacky face, plus her covering herself, it just doesn't. The drawing doesn't work as well for me.
The close up inside the cage where she says, "Get this thing away from me," I think that's a good panel. But the one in the splash, I don't love
Yes.
her. Yeah, I wish she was. Honestly, I don't need that aspect in that splash. But
Right.
yeah,
I love the final page though,
yeah,
where Mark goes, "You are bound, demon, by earth and air, by fire and water, by the light above and the shadows below, by virgin blood and black cat bone. I bring the sigil, the sacrament, and the sacrifice, ringed in flame and sealed in blood. You're bound to my service by the timeless rules of darkness." Which is a very like, yeah, that's the kind of bullshit that people
yeah.
say with ritual magic. Hell yeah, I like it. All right, Hellspawn, look at me and listen up, bitch. Suddenly he's Jesse Pinkman. Because, man, do I have an offer for you. And that's where we end, with Spawn being offered a deal he can probably easily refuse by Mark, the devil worshiper, who summoned him forth by assaulting a girl.
Great.
Yeah, great stuff. Second issue, I kind of gave a final thought on 90. We don't usually do them separately like that, but I don't necessarily need to reiterate that I just didn't frankly enjoy. I thought the mechanical aspects were great. Didn't really enjoy the subject matter. I'll say this one I enjoyed a lot more. It's very obviously, again, I have this brain that can just go, oh yeah, that's the fucking Night Stalker, and I know what the Night Stalker said because I'm that kind of weirdo, and so I get it, and so it worked for me fine, even with that recognition. But I also liked the art in that issue quite a bit, and I thought Greg Capullo and I cannot remember the name of the inker that's recently been on the book.
It's Danny Miki and Lee Matsunami.
Lee Matsunami, yes, and Danny Miki, of course. Doing great, firing on all cylinders. I thought that issue really kicked ass with the art. And again, the rendering of the character of Mark, solid rendering, looked great.
Yeah, it has like 18 abs.
Yeah.
It's great. It's fun. He looks like young Freak.
Yeah, he kind of does.
Which is kind of funny.
Yeah, he kind of does. What's up, young Freak?
Yeah.
Definitely a guy from Atlanta, I'm sure.
Issue 90, yeah, I don't really need to kind of get into it too much again. I think it was an issue of Spawn, certainly.
Yeah.
If you want to know my thoughts, rewind this episode. And you can hear all about them. Issue 91, I think it's interesting, I guess. Like you said, some of the narration, I was not as intimately aware of Richard Ramirez's existence. But when you pointed out and I kind of looked into him a little bit, yeah, makes sense. And it's fun. Listen, the pulled straight from the headlines thing is always going to be a thing in Spawn. And I think it works, right? These are the sort of like, in a weird way, I do think that serial killers become, and this is why true crime has become so popular, is they kind of become American folklore in a lot of ways. And so like, yeah, it makes sense that like that would become the grounds for like a Spawn story. It's fun that Spawn is also just flitting around all over the United States, like doing stuff.
Going to Indiana,
he can
Illinois.
teleport, so like it makes sense that he can just
teleport all the way to Santa Monica, California.
But yeah, 91 I think is a little bit more effective, even if there's like I don't love some aspects of it. I think the art's overall pretty good. And
once again, violence against a young woman.
We can't. It's like the center space in Bingo at this point,
right?
Which is unfortunate. We do have some back matter here in the spawning ground. So in issue 90, as I mentioned earlier, we say hello to Jake McFarlane.
Look at that,
standing there, not standing
next to being held next to the Vern Troyer talking Austin Powers doll.
I will post this on our Instagram because it's too funny not to share. It is a bonkers photo. Like that's definitely in like their family photo album, and he's probably now just like, Dad, why Is it to show that I'm smaller than the mini me figure that you made? Like what?
Yeah, that's what it is. Don't you get it? Isn't that funny?
Because I'm like a mini you. Is that what you were getting at? Probably.
It's funny because you're small.
So we have some letters. We have one letter that asks about Felix the cat. Basically was like, hey, I've been reading your stuff since Amazing Spider-Man, and I noticed that there used to be a lot of Felix the cat. What's the deal with that? And he said, you're absolutely right, Richard. When I was drawing Spider-Man, The Incredible Hulk, and a few other comics in my early in my career, I would try as consistently as possible to put Felix the cat into each of the books. He would be disguised in the background or at the top of a Christmas tree, like you stated, in a very obvious fashion. The reason behind it is when I lived in British Columbia early in my comic drawing career, I met a man who was not altogether upstairs because of activity he'd done in the past.
He was in MK Ultra.
One thing he was very adamant about was his love and affection for Felix the cat. He carried around a stuffed toy of Felix wherever he went. It got in the way because he took it to job interviews and other places where bringing your stuffed toys is not the appropriate thing to do as an adult. When I told him I was drawing The Incredible Hulk and Spider-Man, he was unimpressed. He said his favorite was Felix the cat, and if I ever put him in a book, he would buy it and continue to buy it as long as the cat was in the book. I figured as long as I could sneak our little black feline onto the pages, the worst thing that would happen is I'd be guaranteed one sale every single month. It grew into a bit of a stylistic thing that I did for a few years. So that's kind of fun.
That's actually kind of sweet. I think he should have escalated it and tried to get him in every panel.
Well, he did that, and then the other thing he did, he would hide spiders on his covers. Do you know about that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So all of it, especially on the Spider-Man covers, he would just like hide spiders in the art, which is kind of fun to look at his old ones. They're usually like in the web somewhere, or like in like Green Goblin's mask or whatever, or like Mysterio's mask. It's cool. The next one is like just get somebody from Thunder Bay, Ontario, has like just a million questions about the book. And about like if Major Forsberg is going to reappear. If you remember Major Forsberg from the Cygor plot.
Wow.
And then what dictates pricing. Another reader is asking why the Spawn animated show is not consistent, and Todd is basically like, listen, we made as many episodes as we could, and we tried out a lot of things over the course of time, and they didn't all come out at the same time. So yeah, it's a little inconsistent. We got better at some things and decided not to continue with others. So
I feel like half of fans' questions can just be boiled down to like, hey, why isn't everything perfect?
Yeah, that's kind of, or like they're asking for like, they're wondering if there's like some big secret behind the reasoning for something, and it's usually pretty boring. And
is there like a lore reason why I didn't like this show?
Yeah. In the blah 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 91 though, we get some photos of Woodstock 99.
Oh fuck yeah, with the big ass turlet, baby. That was a hellhole. That if you haven't heard about Woodstock 99, and again, can't get out of these stories without violence against women. What a nightmare it was for people. There were people, the mud just mixed with human shit. It was just carnage.
Here's what Terry Fitzgerald said. He said, "What's up? This month I want to finally
What's up?
This month I want to finally get around to talking about Woodstock 99 out there on the Air Force Base in Rome, New York. First off, being a pacifist from Canada, holding a 3-day music marathon on a closed-down remnant of the Cold War seemed somewhat peaceful and meaningful, until 100 idiots turned it into a war zone on Sunday. I will not harp on and on about the mindless acts of the minority, but rather the cheer and the family feeling the other 124,900 of us enjoyed. That's too many people."
Yeah.
They were treated to the stylings of Gavin Rossdale.
Hell yeah, from Bush.
Yeah, from Bush.
I don't know if you've ever seen Gavin Rossdale circa like 1994, 95, but man, God, that's another dude who, like, when I was young, I was like, I sure like looking at him because of his guitar playing.
That's probably nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
And Saturday was a nonstop day of Terry's favorites, such as Alanis, Kid Rock, the Chemical Brothers, and the Tragically Hip, who are very Canadian. And then was really excited to see Kid Rock do ball with the ball. How do you
Ball
even?
with the
I don't
ball.
even know how to say
Ball
that.
with the ball. Because it was a big radio hit. I could do it, and I'm not going to do it. It's a whole like nonsense phrase that he does. It is the white trash version of supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It's ba with the ba, da bang, da dang, diggy diggy, up with the diggies, jump jump, da boogie, or something like that. And it was like the chorus of his fucking rap song where he goes, "My name is Kid Rock," and like when you're a 16-year-old idiot, you're like, that's probably cool. But also, fuck Kid Rock.
Is Kid Rock part of Trump's cabinet yet?
Yeah, he's gonna be the minister of fucking like rocking out. He's gonna ruin rock and roll officially.
Terry says that Saturday ended with the unparalleled Rage Against the Machine. And Sunday, well, what to say? I got out of there before most of the rampage took place. But the highlight was definitely the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Santa Monica, California.
So I'm not going to read this whole... So I put a pin in one of the letters, and it's this letter. There's one letter in here from Charles PD, Charles Police Department.
Oh, no.
That says...
The entire police department wrote, why is this spawn a cop yet?
Where basically like he breaks down like why he stopped reading. So he's 17. He's been collecting Spawn since issue 20. He currently has every issue from 1 to 86. Never had the pleasure of reading the Angel miniseries and hasn't been interested in Curse of the Spawn. Us either, Charles.
So, for context, I was almost the exact same age as this kid.
Great.
So, word for word, whatever he said is akin to my perspective.
So it says, anyway,
sure.
I'm writing this letter to let you know I think your creation's great. Through the years, I've stopped getting various titles because they don't interest me. Used to be a big fan of Batman during the time, especially when he had his back broken. But a year or so ago, I decided to stop reading Batman. Don't worry, I'm not going to say you've just copied Batman and Venom with your Spawn character either. I think Spawn works perfectly the way he is. And he goes, after all, every superhero is essentially a copy of Superman anyway. The only thing that makes them slightly different is their names, color of their costumes, and where they get their powers. Sometimes those are the same too. Just as long as one variable is different, some comic company can make money off it, but yours is without doubt the best, especially because of all the dimensions the Spawn character has. That's when he goes into like, a couple weeks ago, I decided to go back and read every issue till the present. I've read issues 1 through 70, and I'll tell you, there's nothing like reading 6 issues of Spawn a day. I'd rather read Spawn than watch most of the shows on TV or spend pointless time with my friends, though we still do stuff.
Pointless time with my friends. That's like, God, was that written by a Zoomer?
Reading your issues that often, I've noticed something consistent with them. I've noticed you like to rehash old stuff. Cut it out already. I think you told the basic plot of Spawn's life in every single issue so far. I think 99% of your fans are sick of hearing it. And I noticed some of your issues, especially 65, are a total waste. That's the one that like recaps like previously on Spawn for 64 issues.
Right.
And the Spawn Bible is the exact same thing too. There's no point to these issues except to put cash in your pocket. This is what I mean. And then also, if you can't, now I'm not saying you can't explain stuff for new readers, but this is what the summaries of the last issue are for. Some things you need to cut out right away are filler pages. Here's what I mean by filler pages. 1, the first and or the first couple of pages is devoted to explaining where your character's left off. 2, you make a full page dedicated to one panel or a panel that takes up 2 whole pages. You disguise it to look like some great dramatic picture, but we all know that's just to take up space. 3, when you have those pages where the reporters are talking about the latest news, it ends up reading as 3 people saying the same thing in a different way. 4, I like it when we see different characters doing stuff in the issue and each character gets their own couple pages. However, I've noticed by reading these issues that a majority of the time the characters are just repeating themselves. The only difference, they'll be talking in a different setting or someone else will be incorporated into the conversation. I would much rather see one little word box that says, Terry tells Cog about what's happened these past few weeks, period.
Well, you could just listen to Spawnography, bud.
That's true. His suggestion is that he likes the writing is, I know you have a lot of good ideas. I like your writing the best because no one knows Spawn and where the characters are going better than you, but I don't like your repetitive narration. I would like you to write the comics, but condense the issues a little bit. If you have a story you want to stretch over 3 issues and it takes about 6 filler pages to complete them all, I'd say you're better off having the same stuff take place in 2 issues. I commend you on your creativity, but if you didn't have any pointless rehash issues, then your fans would be forced to buy every issue so as not to miss anything significant. He brings up Billy Kincaid being brought back from the dead, and that it got stretched out. And he says, now it seems like you're stretching everything out and wasting your time, so Spawn won't get where it should till issue 100. After that, it'll be stretched out so that a great comic with an eventual ending will become a never-ending line of comics, just like all your competitors' comics, when the characters are unchanged for hundreds of issues and all they do is fight a new guy each month. If I were you, I'd want to finish it without rushing it sometime before you die. Hopefully that won't be for a long while, but I would hate to see Spawn eventually become something that is owned by a company long after its creator is gone. And then basically he's like, why don't you make it more like the WWF? Because
Great.
Yeah. And Todd says that he enjoys the long, comprehensive letter, that he doesn't ever want to end, that also you shouldn't read all these issues like all in one shot. And he likes doing full page splashes because he likes to draw different stuff. And he never wants to finish Spawn. So, yeah, there you go. That's the back matter. Well, the rest of the back matter actually is a lot of like Austin Powers figures. There's so much Vern Troyer in these
groovy
comics.
Baby.
And also Sleepy Hollow, and also more stuff about Todd's baseballs. Oh, and also the Spawn Nitro Riders.
Baseball.
Which are in the future, organic life and the mechanical form become one. They're just motorcycles. It doesn't seem like they have anything to do with Spawn.
Great. That's great.
Yeah.
Baseball.
So.
That's that's my Todd McFarlane impression. Baseball.
George, before we get out of here, what recommendations do you have for our listeners this week?
You know, I had a recommendation in my head and I can't remember it now. So I'm going to have to come up with one on the fly. You know what? Here is my recommendation. Do something irresponsible and frivolous for yourself. Not something that will hurt you now or in the long run. Not that level of irresponsible or frivolous, but just something spontaneous that has no meaning other than to bring you some happiness.
Something spontaneous?
That's exactly right. You're reading between the lines. But yeah, just find a way to treat yourself a little bit with something that is not part of a rational scheme for your mind, just something you fucking want to do or have.
Fuck yeah. I am going to recommend that you actually watch Rashomon. Yeah. That like if you heard us talking about Rashomon and you've never seen it, that you should just watch it. And then you'll understand a little bit more about what we were talking about. But also you'll understand every time that a TV show or movie does exactly the same thing, because it is one of those it's a template at this point, and it's a classic, and you know, it's easy to watch. It's famous for a reason.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the films of Kurosawa are beautiful, and he has many seminal works. I recommend them as well.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, if you like the show, you can rate, review, subscribe on whatever platform you listen to us. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, etc., etc., etc. All whatever podcatcher you use, we're probably there. If we're not there, you can let us know. You can let us know at spawnographypod@gmail.com. You can find us on the internet in various places at either @spawnography or @spawnographypod. And yeah, we'll get back to you. Leave comments and on stuff, and we'll reply. We love to do that. If you review the show, we'll read it on the air. And yeah, thanks so much for listening. Next episode will be about not Spawn, but he does appear. It's Daring Escapes, numbers 1 through 4.
It's finally happening.
With our friend
We're
Chris.
leaving you on a cliffhanger while we cover Daring Escapes.
Yeah, we're leaving you on a cliffhanger. We're doing it for dramatic effect. We're going to cover it with our friend Chris from the Play Comics podcast. And the following week, we'll finish up with Adam Lotta from the Reddit Spawn's Universe to cover issues 92 and 93 of Spawn. So that's what you got to look forward to. Anyway, George, I have one last thing to say. For Todd so loved the world,
he gave his only begotten Spawn.
See you later, Hellspawn.
Spawn!